Hello and welcome to another edition of the Talking Tigers. I'm your host, Lex McClellan. We are joined this evening, as always, by our co-host, Christopher Culverhouse and Casey Krause. Good evening, gentlemen.
Morning.
Evening.
So, welcome, everyone. This is our first podcast of the 2017 Auburn Tigers tackle football season. I know myself, I simply cannot wait for the season to get going. I've been anxiously awaiting this evening to do our first podcast, and I'm very excited. So we will go ahead and jump right in. This is going to be our season preview podcast. We're just going to kind of do an overview of what we're expecting and looking for this season. And our next preview podcast, we'll get a little bit more in-depth into the schedule, do some predictions. We're not going to do any of that today. But first thing is first, we need to talk about what news has come out of Auburn and from the Auburn football program over the off season. I'll throw it to Christopher. So what's the news?
Well, Lex, you know that old adage, no news is good news?
Of course.
We've had no news. By God, to me, that is great news.
And that's new, right? That's something that as Auburn fans we're not really accustomed to. There's not been anybody suspended. There's not been anybody arrested.
Well, I mean, you look at it, the things that have happened, as you have mentioned to me before, Lex, you had the whole Duke Williams saga over the summer. You had the whole, Jovan Reed gets kicked off, during the summertime.
Yep, Jovan Robinson, and then
camp.
Don't forget, even back in 2014, we had Nick Marshall wind up being suspended for the first half.
Arrested.
Yeah, he gets arrested for marijuana. He's suspended half a game against Arkansas, SEC division game. We've had no issues.
Yeah, and last year we had several players in the offseason get arrested too for marijuana, if you recall. Byron Cowart was in that group and a couple of others. So this is outstanding, man. I can't remember the last time Auburn has literally had no off-season news.
Yeah, that's pretty fantastic. And then, you kind of go through and you say, well, okay, well, what's our major injury concerns, coming into fall camp? And it's kind of the same story, right?
Well, man, I got to get a Paul Bunyan-sized fist to knock on wood on this one. Because, knock on wood, we haven't had any injury news in football yet. We are smooth sailing, man. And I've wondered if there's some sort of curse on the Auburn football program for years about the off-season injuries and how our guys' knees seem to explode. It's like there's time bombs in our ACLs and MCLs and whatever else, and whatever kind of L you have throughout your body. It seems like we're always tearing our ligaments up during the off season. But this off season, Jamel Dean, you remember the whole saga with him?
Of course.
He is completely healthy right now and doing great again. Now, will all of that last? Who knows? But I'll tell you what I will do. I'll enjoy it while it's lasting at the moment. I'm excited about that.
And then we'll move on into specifically, we did have one player, an impact player at that was not present for spring camp, for spring ball, and that was Kyle Davis.
The real 5-star Kyle Davis.
Absolutely. One time the number one overall wide receiver in the class of 2016, and then was later replaced by after he gets recruited successfully to Auburn, gets replaced by Nate Craig Myers, who then also drops a star once he gets recruited to Auburn. But we're not going there.
I think we already did.
So Kyle Davis is back on campus. Am I right?
Yes, he is. And from all reports, he is training extremely hard. He's kicked it into another gear. the summer workouts, he seems to be pushing it a little bit harder than he was. He's a couple of pounds heavier than he was. And so I'm terribly excited about that. I mean, good news. Not only have we gotten no news, but we've also gotten good news in the off season. And man, honestly, I can't remember a time where that happened. And I know I shouldn't be this giddy because when you're an Auburn fan, Lex, you know what I mean. It's like you're almost always waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're waiting for the dark cloud to come. You're waiting for the bad news, the as CCR would say, the bad moon rising. But so far, it hadn't hit, and we just seem to be waiting for it. But I'll enjoy the sunshine at the moment.
Yes, and that coming from our local resident Eeyore, Christopher Culverhouse.
Yeah.
So before we get into kind of breaking down this year's roster, some SEC West news that I think merits at least a bit of conversation, and that is the resignation, albeit forced, of one Ole Miss head coach, Hugh Freeze. I'm gonna throw it to Kraus here. What do you see as far as the impact of the Hugh Freeze dismissal on the SEC West and SEC overall?
Well, I think the guy who they hired is going to run the program right, and obviously they're going to come back to it next offseason to hire somebody. But I think the bagmen in Ole Miss are going to be gone for a while, and I think that clears up more recruiting opportunities for Auburn and the rest of the SEC West. If you've looked over the past couple of years, a lot of the top tier, number 1, number 2 overalls talent have gone to Ole Miss with, some head scratchers and not understanding why they're going there. And we're going to find out here why. It's pretty obvious that some dirty pool was being played down in Ole Miss. I think it puts the SEC West in a more clear tiered position where it's Auburn and Alabama and then everybody else underneath. And
I think it kind of, for now, at least, given the talent on the roster and the relative continuity, I think for now, at least, you have to throw LSU in that
second tier
mix for now.
For now, yeah, they can be in the second tier. Matt Canada's. We'll get into those guys. That's a good football team, but there's just a little bit of a separation when it comes to the talent at quarterback and the rest of the rosters. That it's Auburn and Alabama in this division, and I think Ole Miss is going to take a seat back and not recruit the talent that they have been, and it's going to go back to a little bit of what their traditional powers have always been.
Yeah, I think that certainly is a possibility. Christopher and I were discussing pre-show, and I know you weren't here for this discussion. How long is it going to be? Because we know that Gus Malzahn and Hugh Freeze are close friends. How long is it going to be before Hugh Freeze is employed at Auburn University in some capacity, albeit maybe an analyst or something of that nature? But is that somewhere you could see Hugh Freeze landing, at least partway through the season, maybe for the remainder of the season, or maybe a season or two after? That could be potentially an advantage for Auburn.
See, here's the thing: Jim Tressel did very little in the ways of doing things wrong. Mm-hmm. Kids got out of hand, they sold jerseys, got tattoos, whatever. He doesn't have a division job. Hugh Freeze has handed Ole Miss the death penalty. They are going to get what amounts to be the modern-day death penalty. It'll be worse than USC. It'll be worse than Penn State. This is going to be modern-day SMU. It's going to be a barren wasteland where no one wants to go. And no one will touch Hugh Freeze because of it. He's going to have that red A on him, and you're not going to see him get a job ever again.
That's
He will never coach Division I football again.
okay. Well, I can certainly see that. I guess it really depends on what comes out of the NCAA investigation.
Oh, the hammer is coming down on Ole Miss.
But is it coming down on Hugh Freeze? Is Hugh Freeze going to be held responsible?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no Chip Kelly got show cause, Tressel, Pete Carroll. They all got hammered some way, but they all left too. So that's why we didn't see them not coach in the NCAA, as they all went to the NFL, where
Right.
Hugh Freeze doesn't have that opportunity. So we don't really think of those guys of not coaching in the college because they moved on, where Hugh Freeze, we're just not going to see him coach, just like
Right.
Jim Tressel.
Okay.
What was anybody remember off the top of their head what the show clause length for Jim Tressel was?
It was like 5 years, and he ended up going to be an AD somewhere, and then he went and did assistant coaching with the Colts, and then he's a coach or an assistant coach somewhere on lower level right now, like Fordham or something like that. But
And Tressel was in his 70s at the time, wasn't he, or late 60s?
he's a little older, yeah. I'd say he's in his early later 60s now.
You have to think about Hugh Freeze, right? He's
He's
pretty
really
doggone
young.
young. I mean,
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, but
he's not hurting. Like, he's going to be okay. He's not going to starve
he
to
was the
death.
Youngstown
Yeah,
State coach, right?
But
So I just don't see it right now. How he makes his way back from basically burying a major SEC program and comes back from that.
yep.
Well, I mean, Houston Nutt got another chance and coached again and gave him the death penalty through being crappy.
Yeah,
But I
mean,
realize
that's just to
it is
show
different
that he wasn't a good
circumstances.
coach.
Oh, in fact, Houston Nutt is the gift that keeps on giving. Without Houston Nutt, this whole thing probably doesn't happen.
Oh no, that's the lawsuit that Houston Nutt brought up. That was
Yeah, I mean, it was his lawyer that called the phone
Discovery.
calls in. Too.
In Discovery. They found phone calls, right? I mean, yeah, he is the gift that keeps on giving back to Ole Miss, but
Yeah,
Right.
he blew him up while he was coaching. And now he did it again.
But like I said, this is modern day SMU, paying players the Pony Express kind of thing going on.
I don't know if
I
it's going to
think
be
Freeze
as bad
will
as
be
Penn
back
State.
in some kind of assistant role. I do.
Well-
I don't think he'll ever. I do agree with Krause on this much. I don't think he is going to ever be a head coach. It's certainly not D1 again. But I could see him being an assistant again. What else is he going to do?
I will agree. He's not going to head coach again.
He might go back to big time high school football.
He could do that. He might.
It's not like they don't pay those guys six figures.
I could see Hugh Freeze being Gus's offensive coordinator years down the road. I really could.
Yeah, after the Chip Lindsey firework fizzles out, or he leaves and goes to be a head coach somewhere.
I gotta say, I'll just sidetrack for just a moment, and we'll get right back on it. I have a sneaky feeling that somehow, some way, Lindsey ends up, or not Lindsey, sorry. I'm thinking of Chip Kelly ends up back at Oregon. But anyway, sorry for digressing there. Go ahead.
Well,
My apologies.
no, it's all good. We'll move on
I
from.
think he'll wind up there.
We'll move on from the Hugh Freeze discussion. I thought it was.
Yeah.
I thought it warranted. It was a significant enough story in our
It did.
division of our conference. It warranted
It did.